to free all 125 hostages and ensure that Gaza will never pose a threat to Israel again. All objectives are within reach. Israel will not compromise on any of them. We'll begin with an update on IDF casualties. Since the outset of the war, IDF fatalities have unfortunately risen to 639. Staff Sergeant Ido Appel was aged 21 years old and was from Tzofar in the Negev desert. Staff Sergeant Amir Galilov was 20 and from Shimshit in the Galilee. Staff Sergeant Uri Bar-Or was 21 from Midreshet Ben Gurion, also in the Negev. All three fell in battle in southern Gaza. May their memories be a blessing. Our hearts go out to all the families of those soldiers killed in action defending our country, as well as to those who were murdered, taken hostage, and wounded. Next, I want to update you on the preliminary findings released yesterday by the IDF on the strike on two senior Hamas terrorists on Sunday night in Rafa and the regrettable civilian casualties that resulted. These two Hamas terrorists were both responsible and actively planning deadly attacks on Israelis. Their deaths saved lives. You can see the initial findings for yourself on the IDF website, but I wanted to highlight here some key points. IDF are focusing on the secondary explosions, likely from a Hamas ammunition warehouse near the targets that were unknown to our forces. Intercepted conversations between terror activists released indicate that the IDF strike was a small attack and that the Hamas ammunition warehouse nearby caused significant secondary explosions, which led to the fire. This is evidenced by footage from Gazans showing secondary explosions. And contrary to reports, the strike was 1.8 kilometers away from the designated humanitarian area that we have called civilians to evacuate to. The strike was conducted using the smallest munitions in the IDF armory used by our jets. Our munition alone could not have ignited this fire. The investigation is ongoing. It will be swift, comprehensive, and transparent. Our war is against Hamas, not against the people of Gaza, which is why we convey deep sorrow for this tragic loss of life. But a tragic incident in Rafah is yet another clear example of Hamas's double war crime of targeting Israeli civilians from within the Palestinian population. Make no mistake, that ammunition that appeared to have caught fire and resulted in the death of Palestinian civilians was meant for us. It was meant to take Israeli lives. So either way, Hamas is satisfied. Hamas wants Israelis to die. Hamas wants Palestinians to die for their sick goal of obliterating the Jewish state. And here's another thing that Hamas wants you to do, to shift the blame to Israel for their double war crime. Don't fall for it. Don't incentivize their methods of war by not reporting the truth and publishing the Hamas narrative, Hamas propaganda, Hamas statistics throughout this war. I noticed there was a viral social media campaign in the last 24 hours or so reading, "All eyes are on Rafah." Well, all lies are on Rafah. Don't rush to conclusions. Wait for the facts. I now want to shift your attention to some overlooked aspects of the war. First, notice this figure. More than 17,500 missiles were launched at Israeli territory since the beginning of the war from two fronts combined, Gaza in the south and Lebanon in the north. Israel refuses to accept this reality. This will not be our routine. No other country would have tolerated this. And second, don't neglect the other terror fronts of this war. Today, yet again, an Israeli community, Bat Hefel, came under fire by Palestinian terrorists shooting from the Tulkarem area in the West Bank under the control of the Palestinian Authority. Side note to Norway, Ireland, and Spain, this is your recognized Palestinian terror state in action. Lastly, an update on our efforts to flood Gaza with aid and counter Hamas's efforts to increase the civilian suffering there. Yesterday, 465 humanitarian aid trucks went into Gaza. 124 trucks were coordinated and transferred to northern Gaza. In addition, 45 pellets containing tens of thousands of packages of aid were airdropped. There are 8 operational field hospitals and 3 mobile clinics, as well as 3 new hospital initiatives that are currently being reviewed. Fuel is also entering Gaza in support of humanitarian infrastructure there. And using this fuel, the Palestinian Water Authority refueled the water pumps in northern Gaza. And that's the end of our briefing today. I will now take your questions, which you should put in the chat with your full name and news outlet, please.
Thank you. First question from Tom O'Connor, Deputy Editor of Foreign Policy at Newsweek. Would Israel accept the deployment of a UN peacekeeping force in the Gaza Strip as a potential solution to combating the threat posed by Hamas? And does Israel continue to see the current UNIFIL mission on the Blue Line as a constructive and useful actor given the ongoing violence on this frontier?
Thank you for your question, Tom. What we want to see in Gaza in the day after Hamas is a demilitarized territory and a de-radicalized society, potentially run by local civil administrators who have no link to terrorism, of course. Now, based on past and current experience that Israel has had with UN peacekeeping forces, it certainly doesn't appear to put it mildly, that a mission of this kind, a UN mission, could guarantee our security. So this is why we say, and the Prime Minister has said, that in the foreseeable future, Israel will have to maintain some security responsibility over the Gaza Strip to make sure that we don't see any kind of resurgence of terrorism after we destroy Hamas as a governing body and as an army of terror. And what do I mean when I say past and current experience with UN peacekeeping forces? You know, UNIFIL forces, you mentioned them, along with the Lebanese government, they were supposed to keep the calm on our border with Lebanon by enforcing UN Security Council Resolution 1701, according to which Hezbollah, at the end of the Second Lebanon War in 2006, was supposed to withdraw its forces 18 miles north, away from the border with Israel. And this hasn't happened. We've had missiles, hostile drone infiltrations from the north almost every day now. Israeli soldiers, Israeli civilians were killed, were injured by Hezbollah fire. And don't forget that we have about 61,000 Israelis who still can't return to their homes in the north for nearly 8 months now. Do you think they trust UN security guarantees? Of course not. Also, don't forget that we already had a UN peacekeeping force in the Gaza Strip and in the Sinai, that they were supposed to keep the calm after the Suez Canal crisis back in 56, and what happened in 1967. Egyptian President Jamal Abdel Nasser, he asked them to leave, so they left, and he went ahead to launch a war against Israel, the Six-Day War. So to your question, fool me once, fool me twice, but a third time, it's clear that UN forces alone won't be sufficient to ensure anyone's security in Israel.
Thank you. Question from James Mackenzie at Reuters regarding the situation between Hamas and Fatah. Do you have any comment on their efforts to reach a reconciliation, specifically on the recent talks convened by China? Hamas seems to indicate in its recent statements that it would like to play a role in the post-war phase of Palestinian politics and is talking about seeking a deal with Rafa over forming a government of technocrats. How would Israel view such a development?
So I can't speak to Palestinian reconciliation efforts for the reason that I don't speak for Hamas, I don't speak for the Palestinian Authority, and obviously, I don't speak for China. I speak for the Israeli Prime Minister's office. What I can say in that respect, though, is that the Palestinian Authority, since the October 7th massacre, since the Hamas army of terror invaded our borders and butchered our communities, they have not condemned Hamas for their actions. And in fact, I think some Palestinian Authority officials even said on multiple occasions that they do see Hamas in the picture in the future of some shared Palestinian leadership or so. So there you have it. That's unfortunate.
Thank you. Question from Benjamin Weinthal from Fox News Digital. Memory published a critique of a 2013 academic essay by ICC prosecutor Khan. in which he cast doubt in belief that justice can be delivered for defendants at the ICC. What's the Prime Minister's view of Khan's article?
Well, I haven't seen this article, but what the ICC chief prosecutor is trying to do is, it's a vicious smear against Israel, and it's not only about Israeli leaders. Of course, it's about trying an attempt to prevent Israel from exercising its right of self-defense. We said a lot about it. It's very obvious where we stand. There's no power in the world that would stop us from defending our people, destroying Hamas, and bringing back all hostages home. To that specific report, again, I haven't seen it, so I can't comment on it.
Second question from Benjamin Weinthal at Fox News Digital. Was there a defective translation about what the Prime Minister said about Rafa? Did he say tragic mistake or tragic incident?
I can tell you that the Prime Minister obviously meant that any loss of civilian life in Gaza is a tragedy. And he often says that, for Hamas, it's a strategy.
Thank you. Question from Joel Pollack at Breitbart News. Saudi Arabia accused Israel today of continuous genocidal massacres in Gaza. What does that mean for the prospect of a normalization deal between Saudi Arabia and Israel? First,
there's no genocide in Gaza. This narrative is completely false. It's outrageous. And, Israel is carrying out a war of self-defense against an existential genocidal threat called Hamas. That's what's happening. This has been the case since October 7th. And we will continue to fight this war until we achieve all our war aims, as I stated them at the top of the briefing. To your question about peace, Israelis, we want peace. We're ready to shake hands with anyone interested in making peace with us and is serious about it. And we have a track record in the region of making peace with Arab nations to prove it. If anyone is serious about making peace with us, we are very interested in expanding the circle of peace.
Thank you. Question from Jim Williams at Zenga International News Service, Washington, D.C. At briefings yesterday given by you, the IDF, Matt Miller at the State Department, and General Kirby at the White House, all of you were on the same page, that Israel was moving into Rafah in a strategic way, attempting to protect innocent civilians while attacking Hamas. Meanwhile, in capitals around the world, there was universal condemnation of Israel and the US for the Rafah actions. Why is there such a disconnect in other countries?
Thank you for this question, Jim. I think you're bringing up an important point here because, and I sort of addressed it earlier in the briefing, the news cycle influences the global community. So this is why it's very, very important that people wait for the facts to come out. After and the Rafa incident, it's not the first time that we've seen it, that people rush to conclusion, rush to make judgment before the IDF publishes the facts of what really happened on the ground, and then the damage is done. The disinformation, the lies, the Hamas propaganda that is often being repeated, echoed by international news outlets, it's causing damage. It has ramifications. And you're talking about these protests. Some of them are, I call them pro-Hamas protests because you never see signs of people there calling on Hamas to surrender and release the hostages. So this is dangerous. This is dangerous to Jews in the diaspora because it infuels the sentiments of anti-Semitism. This is why we say don't rush to judgment. We've seen it with the Al-Ahli incident in the beginning of the war, back in October, for example. That was another good example of this, of how the news cycle was already out making a judgment that Israel struck a hospital. Hamas claimed 500 civilians died on the spot, but few hours later, it all transpired that this was a vicious lie. And in fact, it was a Palestinian Islamic Jihad missile that fell short in the parking lot of that hospital in Gaza, killing a few dozens. So these lies, they're dangerous. I'll just say it this way. They're very, very dangerous. This is why it's important that we keep the accuracy here. And when we conduct an investigation, we take it very, very seriously. So wait for the facts.
Thank you. That was the last question.
And that concludes the daily briefing for today. Thank you for joining us.